Good morning, everyone. Okay, I'm just going to start. About 15 years ago, something happened to me in my marriage that it shook me to my core. My heart cut. Everything I believed about my life seemingly now seemed to be a lie. It was disorienting, it was painful physically, emotionally, and it played out very publicly in front of friends, in front of strangers, in front of enemies. It was life-changing, you know. Some people may know what I'm talking about, some might not, but this watershed event fuels everything that I now do and everything that I now say. The truth is, I surprise myself when I say that when I look back, I would not change this for the world. I wouldn't change the way my story was written for the world. It truly is that strength, courage, and character. Honestly, they're always birthed through adversity, and we've heard this from many of the speakers. The most painful part of my life to date has birthed 8 books. It's made it possible for me to speak in front of all of you today. It made me meet NHN, that's how I met her online, you know. And one day I'm actually going to have an event or something where I actually share my story and my journey, as we've heard from many people here today, even though some of it is captured in one of my books, you know, 49 Ways, you know, but this isn't a sales pitch. So you might wonder, why am I giving you all this information? And the truth of the matter is, the reason why I'm giving you all this information is that after 60 years on this earth, I'll be 61 by the grace of God in November, yes. After 60 years on this world, on this earth, after 32 years of marriage, one thing that I know, and this remains my mantra, is that marriage takes work to make it work. And I always say, let's all then get to work. You know, marriages, relationships must be built. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. You know, building healthy relationships. That's what I've been asked to speak about. Healthy relationships do not happen by happenstance. They must be built. They must be built. And this is something I have learned in my journey. You know, when we think about healthy relationships, just as I've done right now, we usually look at it from the point of view of romantic relationships. But you see, the guidelines and the principles for relationships cut across to a normal, you know, to a large extent. They cut across with friends, with family, with colleagues, you know, healthy relationships kind of cuts across. But I'm going to kind of take it a little bit from the point of view of marriage, because that's my niche. That's what I know. Like Auntie Betty says, that's what I've lived, that's what I've experienced. Healthy relationships are fundamental to our well-being as human beings, you know, more so our primary relationship, the relationship of marriage. And it's critical that we intentionally build our relationships, you know, because the statistics show consistently that people in unhappy marriages are nearly 3 times more likely to develop major depression within a year than compared to those in happier marriages. Marital dissatisfaction accounted for almost 30% of new depression cases, and children of mothers in unstable relationships had an 8.2 times higher probability of emotional or behavioral problems. Marriage matters. We have to make our relationships matter. And loneliness, which is a common feeling in unhappy or disconnected relationships, is associated with increased risk of coronary or heart disease. Marriage matters. I'm passionate about it. All relationships, because it's building healthy relationships. But marriage is so fundamental. I tell you from experience, it's fundamental. So much of what I'm going to say is going to be from personal experience, but it's also backed by studies and research, and of course, you know, by what I like to call an ancient manuscript, you know, of 66 books that is the #1 bestseller of all time, the Bible. So, first things first. You see, apart from the fact that we need to build happy relationships, it's very critical that we realize that building a happy relationship, I don't know how many people are single here. I know there are a lot of married people because I know people here. Please put up your hand if you're single. Okay, wonderful. There's a good number. So for those who will watch later, for those who will watch online, the the truth of the matter is that building happy relationships or healthy relationships is going to start before you ever meet anybody who you want to have a relationship with. The health of your relationship is going to be affected by, the person you actually choose, and it's also going to be affected by you yourself, what you are, how you are. There's a movie, The Emperor's Club, and a quote from that movie says that the end depends on the beginning. And that thing stuck with me. So I have these conversations with them constantly. I want to speak to two classes of people, and again I say it's relevant for us who have adult children or who are raising people who will eventually need to be in happy relationships. And those two people are one, those who are single and those who are engaged or in a serious relationship. In one of my books, people say my books have very interesting titles. In one of my books, and the title of that book is Boom, and Boom, Bob's your uncle, and For Real, Fanny's your aunt. I deal in extensively with something I like to call PPMCs, premarital classes. Because before you ever even meet somebody, it's important that you're ready to be in a relationship. Sometimes the person that we've already become precludes us from even learning anything that can help us be in a relationship or help us commit to the intentionality that relationships require. And so for anyone who is single, there are three pertinent questions you need to ask yourself. Keeps cutting off. There are three pertinent questions to ask oneself and answer if you're single. And those three questions, one of them, a lot of people have dealt a lot with them. Those three questions are: who am I? What and who would I like to be? And how do I intend to get there? The first thing we're going to do with is who am I? I'm not going to look at what and who would I like to be and how do I intend to get there. But the issue of who you are is very important in any relationship. To build a healthy relationship, you're going to have to answer truthfully, ideally prior to embarking on any relationship. You're going to have to answer the question truthfully: who am I? Now, psychologists say that 90 to 95% of what we think and say or ultimately do is influenced by our childhood experiences. And as a single person, if you weren't privileged to ask yourself the question, who am I? You're going to need to do it if you want to be in a healthy relationship. In fact, some studies say that in most of us, by the age of 30, our character is set in stone and will never soften again. So who am I? Is this a simple question? Absolutely not. It's not. When you ask yourself this question, it peels off multiple layers of who you are. You may surprise yourself when you ask yourself this question. We're shaped by our experiences, by environment, by how we see ourselves in relation to how others see us. Our self-concept, who we are, who we think we are, who our parents, our environment, many things have shaped us to be. All these will impact significantly how we're able to have a healthy relationship or not. The best of us struggle when it comes to the intimacy, and vulnerability and transparency that relationships require. Many of us struggle. We do, because so much has happened to us that precludes us from being the kind of person who can build and have a healthy relationship. Let's look, for instance, at a girl who grew up in a society where women are marginalized or treated as less than. She's likely to be conditioned to feel that she is less than and that she cannot have a particular kind of relationship. Or societies where men are thought to have a stiff upper lip or to hold everything in. Both of these things will preclude them having the kind of vulnerability and transparency that a healthy relationship will require. Or take me, for instance. I grew up in a home where my mother was a very dominant character. My dad was a bit less so. And this affected my choice of life partner. It really did. When I look back now to be more self-aware, it affected the kind of person I chose to get married to, and it affected the way I operated in my marriage initially. And this was not advantageous to either my husband nor I. I feel personally that some of the challenges I have experienced in my 32 years of marriage would have been mitigated or been slightly different if I had a different experience growing up. And I'm not saying my experience growing up was bad, but suffice it to say that I feel if I was more in my relationship, if I had been more, I don't want to use the word dominant, but let me use the word dominant for want of a better word, and less passive, more involved in certain decisions, I feel I could have helped my husband better. I feel I could have helped him deal with some of the challenges he faced. I feel I could have dealt with some of the challenges I have faced differently. And so the way we come up, who we are, who we have evolved to be, does have a particular way of affecting our relationships. And I simply say this to say, this is why that self-introspection is important before you get married, and even while you're in a marriage. You have to know who you are, because that will enable you have a better relationship and have the tools necessary to build. I also want to encourage us that while we can be set in stone with the things we have experienced and the things that have shaped us, that #1 bestseller of all time that I like to refer to tells us not to be conformed. There are things that happen to us that can conform us to a certain way of behaving or certain perspectives. It tells us to be transformed, and that transformation comes with relearning how to change the things that have changed you, or to change the things that have shaped you. You understand? And science is catching up with this truth now in areas like neuroplasticity, where even though it seems as if your brain is set in a particular way, you can change, you can rewire it by learning, by inputting new information. I actually have a form which anybody who is interested in and reaches out to me, I'll give them. It's also in one of my books, where that 40 questions that help you determine who am I really. So that's the first set of people with regard to building healthy relationships, the fact that who you were can affect how you can build. And the second thing I'd like us to consider in building healthy relationships is that if you've met somebody, I cannot overemphasize the importance of premarital classes. We spend so much on weddings. Where we're coming from, Nigeria, where I guess I'm from, you can spend millions on a venue, millions on a wedding dress, millions on the gifts that you give people, but premarital classes that cost a fraction of what you spend on those things, nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to give somebody premarital classes. Nobody wants to talk to young people or anybody about premarital classes. That is the second thing. Remember that we're talking building healthy relationships. And I'm telling you that building healthy relationships starts before you even meet somebody or before you're married. There are necessary areas to look at in premarital classes. Preparation for marriage. Are you really ready for what the journey of marriage entails? Marriage is a journey. Are you ready for it? Can you communicate effectively? What are your core values? What is the compass that you use to navigate life, both in life's highs and in life's lows? When you say your vows, whether traditional, secular, or whatever vows you say, do both of you understand the implications of what you're saying? Are you ready to meet each other's needs? How do you resolve conflict? What do you think about physical intimacy? What roles, if you believe, I believe a wife is this, does the person I'm with believe that that's the same thing, and vice versa? What do you say about money? What is your relationship with parents and in-laws? It's important in order to build a healthy relationship before you ever have a relationship. Premarital classes are critical to this. And so, we've looked at what to do prior to ever being in a relationship, and you're not married till you're married. So even if you're engaged, you're not married until you are married. So we've looked at the things you need to look at prior to getting into a relationship. But let's look at how to build healthy relationships in the marriage relationship. And as I've said, some of these things will apply to other things as well. And we're going to look at it from 3 central areas, even though there are lots of ways to look at it. I'm going to look at it from the point of view of communication, which is the lifeblood of any relationship, from the point of view of navigating conflict, and the point of view of boundaries. And let's start with communication. You see, communication is the ability to impart information. And communication is not just the words you speak, because it's imparting information by speaking, by writing, or some other medium, and it underpins everything. If you can't communicate, you can't speak, you can't have good intimate relationships, you can't talk about money, you can't talk about your likes and your dislikes, you can't talk about anything. The ability to communicate is critical to any relationship, and more so, as I've said, the marriage relationship. Information must be imparted, it must be exchanged, and it must be imparted and exchanged in an articulate, clear, and effective manner. It has to be. So for instance, back in the day when there used to be talking drums, and all of us are tush, but talking drums and things like that, the message had to be clear and concise, even though it wasn't spoken. In fact, this #1 bestseller tells us that if the trumpet gives an uncertain sound, who's going to prepare for war? Message given has to be concise. You understand? The person you're speaking to has to be able to understand what you're saying, else you're not communicating. So I want to give us some pointers for communication. And I want to say that I always like to say when I'm speaking, that I speak these things honestly, right from the depth of my belly. Having been through the journey of marriage for 32 years, having been through the highs and the lows, having learned how to build relationships myself, the ability to communicate is so key. And one of the first ways to look at communication is, what kind of communicator are you? You must be able to identify, how do I particularly communicate, and are there things I have to do to communicate better? And studies have shown that there are 4 major kinds of communication: passive, passive-aggressive, aggressive, and then assertive. So let's look at many of us, say in marriage, where you want to communicate something to a significant other. Probably you want to spend more time with the person. One person, a passive person, may say, it's fine, you're probably too busy anyway, maybe we can hang out sometime if you want. Not clear. And as women, we tend to communicate in that way. You're going out again, as opposed to, I'd really love it if you stayed in and we curled up and watched a movie. Honestly, in terms of communication, we need to be self-aware and identify how we communicate, and we need to communicate better. Sometimes my husband will say to me, I'll say something and he responds in a particular way, and it's because probably I said it in a particular way. So be clear, be concise. The person must understand what you're saying. What kind of communicator are you? So for instance, if you wanted to spend more quality time, they say assertive is the best way to speak. And I've realized that personally, I guess I'm kind of somewhat of a passive-aggressive communicator. What kind of communicator are you? Because the way you communicate is going to determine how your relationship has the strong potential to be. If you wanted to spend more time, it's best probably, especially for us women who tend to think he should know. We tend to think to ourselves, why do I have to tell him? He should know. So instead of saying, well, you're too busy anyway, why not say, I value the time we spend together. I'd really love it. I've been missing our times together. Can we plan something together so that it's concise, so the man understands what you're talking about, or indeed anybody that you're in a relationship with in context with what we're saying. So #1, you must determine what kind of communicator you are. #2, we need to practice active listening. And the thing is that active listening does not come naturally to human beings. We don't. It seems funny, but it isn't. To listen properly in order to communicate, to be able to build your relationship, you must have the ability to listen to the words behind the words. And I'm glad there's some men here, because for women, everything that's said matters just as much as what is not said. So active listening requires you to really engage with what a person is saying, not really waiting to respond, not really thinking of what you want to respond, but to understand exactly what the person is saying and what is behind what the person is saying. #3, a lot of people, I think Auntie Betty spoke about it, and what you're telling yourself. I think Pastor Mildred also spoke about it in some ways as well. What do you tell yourself? Because there's interpersonal communication, but there's also intrapersonal communication, as I've had it written here. What do you tell yourself? As a man thinking that is the way the person is, make sure that your communication with yourself is wholesome. That dialogue that happens within you needs to be wholesome dialogue. You need to be able to tell yourself things that are wholesome and that serve to edify you and serve to make you feel good about yourself. You must also tell yourself things that are authentic, because if you can't communicate authentically with yourself, you can't communicate authentically with anybody else. It's very important, because this type of communication, it builds self-awareness, it strengthens emotional intelligence, it improves your confidence and clarity in relationship, and it encourages mindfulness communication with others. So, this one I like to say, I like to call it the mixed communication of the sexes. In order to communicate, to further building healthy relationships, you have to understand that men and women communicate very differently. In fact, I call women's language warm gauge, where everything said matters just as much as what is not said. And I call the man's language man gauge, because men communicate very directly. So, if you're speaking Igbo to somebody who only understands Yoruba, they're not going to understand what you said. The languages are very diverse. Communication cannot happen. And communication, in order to make somebody do what you're trying to communicate to them about, will not happen. And even if something like French and Italian, I speak Italian. In French and Italian, some words are similar, but the understanding will not be complete. To build a healthy relationship, you must have the ability to communicate in a language that the other person understands. And so as women, when we're communicating with our men, if we're communicating in the nuanced manner that we communicate with each other, you might not get the desired outcome. And as a man, if you're communicating with your wife in a way that is so direct and so forthright and so to the point, you might not get your point across. So we must ensure in the relationship, romantic relationships, but in any relationship, that the language you're speaking is a language that the person can understand. Women tend to be more nuanced in their conversations. Men tend to be more direct. And we must bridge that gap. And remember, I'm talking about the fact that whilst I'm concentrating on the marriage relationship, many of these things will come across different kinds of relationships. Number 5, communication is not just words. The ambit of communication and its expression is not just speech. There's so much more involved in it. Communication is more than the words that are coming out of your mouth. In fact, 7% of communication only comes from the actual words. Everything else is your tone, your body language, the way you react, your facial expression, your mien, So true communication isn't just about speaking, it's the way you present what you want to say. Effective communication requires a lot of harmony between the words that are said, the context in which they're said, the way you present when saying it. And then number 6, touch. And I know Pastor Gideon spoke about touch yesterday. Another form of communication is touch. And of course, appropriate touch. In marriage, the touch will be different from any communication you're expressing through touch with somebody else. For instance, a firm handshake is a form of communication. But in marriage, the touch might be different. And touch for communication, tactile communication or haptic communication can play many roles. It can mean I want you next to me. It can mean I like how you feel. It can mean reassurance. It can mean comfort. All these things come into play. And all these things are the things that will help you build the kind of relationship that is wholesome, that is healthy, that gives you the comfort and the settledness, if there's a word like that, that you will use to thrive in a relationship. As I've said, touch can be comfort and care, it can be affection and bonding, it can be authority or control, it can have cultural meanings. But touch activates the same parts of the brain that is involved in emotional processing. So, building healthy relationships requires that you prepare yourself to have the tools necessary to be in a relationship. And this should happen even before you go into a relationship. Number 2, people who are engaged, premarital counseling is critical. And anybody who thinks it's not should look at the statistics we have for unhappy marriages, or the things that are happening now where some marriages barely make it to a year. And then number 3, communication is so key. And I've spoken about different kinds of communication. The fact that what communication means is that you're able to express your needs, your wants, your desires to another person, but present it articulately and present it in a language that that person can truly understand. It's not only communication that builds healthy relationships. Even though communication is key, God communicates with us very, very clearly. It's not just communication that is really important when it comes to relationships or building them. It's very important that you also have the ability to navigate conflict, which is inevitable in any relationship. And the issue of communication segues off quite nicely into conflict, because there is no way to resolve conflict if you can't communicate. It's impossible for you to tell another person what you like, what you don't like, how you feel about something, how something has made you feel, if you can't communicate. So it's important that we prepare for conflict. Conflict happens for various reasons. We're all different. Human beings are flawed. So many things are simmering under the surface. And we're all naturally self-centered. We're more attuned to our own needs and desires. Not that we're willfully ignoring somebody else's, but we're just more attuned to ourselves. So how do you navigate conflict? It's important that you discuss the issue, especially in marriage. You discuss the issue. Don't avoid things. Don't sweep things under the carpet. Anything swept under the carpet, anything buried, never comes up the same way. In fact, I have something that I say: what you don't discuss in peacetime, you're likely to have to discuss in war. Be specific. Do not generalize. Especially for us women, what do you want and what don't you want? Listen not just to what the other person is saying, but what they're not saying. What are the words behind the words? Guys, if we say, you're going out again, it simply means we want to spend more time with you. If I say, what's my hair looking like, or, take a look, I expect you to say more than is necessary. So listen to not just what is being said, but the words behind them. Admit when you're wrong. Sorry really is a magic word. If you've done something wrong, just say sorry. A sincere apology can rebuild trust. It can build your relationship. Focus on solutions. My husband says, what is the solution to it? That's what my husband always says to me. Focus on solutions, not just what happened to you. Focus on what can be done about it. This is what happened, this is how it made me feel, this is what I think can make me feel better. Then always repair. After a disagreement, make sure that it's discussed and that repair happens. Admit the part you have played. Look at where it all went wrong. Then remember to forgive. All of us are flawed. We must extend grace. To build a healthy relationship, forgiveness will be key. Then I want us to look at some do's and don'ts. Do not have the mindset that you must always be the victor and never the vanquished. Do not say something yes to something that you really mean no to. No is a word, as they say. No is a complete sentence. No is not obnoxious, and it doesn't have to be said obnoxiously. Do always work at arriving at a place that is mutually acceptable to both of you. Think mutually acceptable. Always seek to arrive at a place that is mutually acceptable. Any other path can lead to mutually assured destruction. It's important you think mutually acceptable as opposed to mutually mutually assured destruction, which is mad. And do realize that two things can be true at the same time. You both might be expressing the same thing, but in different ways and from different perspectives. Two things can be true at the same time. God is a lion, but he's also a lamb. So two things can actually be true at the same time. Then pause before you react. Pause before you react. Then stay on the issue at hand. Mind your tone and body language. Take breaks when needed. You can have a safe word. Seek help if needed. And then I want to talk about boundaries. Boundaries are essential. There's a boundary between the land and the water that God set in place. You understand that, but the water doesn't overflow the boundaries onto the land, and when it does, you have tsunamis. So it's important that there are boundaries. Boundaries determine where you begin and end, and where another person begins and ends. It's very important to have guidelines and guidelines. Healthy boundaries are not selfish. They're a part of self-care. They're necessary. They determine personal autonomy. But in order to do boundaries, you have to know yourself first. So we come back to the issue of who am I? You have to know yourself. You have to know that this is what I like and this is what I definitely do not like. And you have to have the ability to communicate this to another person. You can't set healthy boundaries if you don't know what you need. Any boundaries must be communicated clearly, and they must be communicated kindly. No mustn't be obnoxious. And I dare say that in order for your no to be an easier pill to swallow, there need to be a lot of yeses too. Because if there are a lot of yeses, then your no becomes much easier to swallow, easier pill to swallow. It's important that we remember that boundaries are not walls. Boundaries don't shut people out, but they allow you to engage in relationships with others without losing yourself. To return to what I said about myself and any particular challenges I may have had, I believe there was a need to set boundaries. And in order to set those boundaries, I needed the watershed event that made me understand that even though my husband and I are one, that I'm an autonomous person in and of myself. And I learned this in a hard way, but I did learn it, and it served me well in my relationship of 32 years today. So boundaries are not walls. Also be consistent, don't be wishy-washy. What are your boundaries? State them clearly, and yes, they can evolve as you evolve, but be consistent. You understand? Be who you are, be true to who you are, know who you are, be true to that. Then expect resistance, especially if you've been in a relationship for a while. It's not easy to change things, which is why I encourage young people to know who they are, because it will then determine the kind of person you align yourself to. When you begin to set boundaries in place, when certain things have already happened, sometimes you may meet resistance, but you keep at it. And then practice self-respect and self-care. It's an act of, boundaries are an act of self-love. It means that you've thought through and you've looked at what you like, what you don't like, and you've determined that this is who you are, this is what you like, and you're able to communicate it to others and stand by it. You see, I've talked about the fact that it's very important that we build healthy boundaries. We live in a fallen and decaying world. What you don't put effort into naturally deteriorates. When you tidy your room, it doesn't remain tidy. It gets untidy. You have to put in effort to make it tidy again. I say this to say that relationships have to be built. It's important that we build them for our own health, well-being. And you see, when you build your relationship, it transcends you. You know, when I was trying to get ready for this, I wrote down here that building a healthy relationship is building beyond you. Tara has something like that. Building beyond you. Because when you set the pace and have a relationship that is healthy, it's transgenerational in its impact. And I want to say this specifically about marriage. It's building beyond you. Your children are seeing what you're doing. Other people in your sphere of influence are seeing what you're doing. It's so critical. In fact, marriage for me, and I'm going to zeroing on marriage now. Marriage to me is the fundamental, most important thing that you have to take care of and ensure that it thrives. Because the implications for everything else are myriad. And the impact of it is transgenerational. And a bit of a digressing as I begin to wind down. You see, your desire to have a healthy relationship is directly proportional. Is it proportional or proportionate to the amount of effort and intentionality that you're willing to put in? It's never going to happen by happenstance. It's going to be something that you look at the various principles for it and then you apply them. And for anybody here who is in a relationship, especially in marriage, that has been painful or heart-rending, I want to just say to you I digress a bit. I just want to tell you that there is a balm in Gilead, but you have to apply it. You have to take the things that are necessary to build in order to have it. I really mean it, because I know that there will be people that are going through hard times in marriage or relationships or whatever. There's a balm in Gilead, but you have to apply it. And in applying it, these principles will apply. So, in closing, that's really what I have to say about healthy relationships. Make sure that you align yourself with the right kind of person. Because you see, if you're trying to do it within a marriage, it's not that it's impossible, but it can be difficult. Premarital classes for anyone who is not already married are critical, and there are many people here that have, a couple of people I know that have good courses, robust courses for premaritals. Look at your communication. How do you communicate? How do you put across your ideas, your needs, your wants, your desires? But the only way you're going to know what your needs, wants, and desires are is that you need to know who you are. Know that conflict is going to arise in any relationship you have. It's not unusual. In fact, conflict causes your relationship to grow. So you must have the tools needed for navigating conflict. And then thirdly, you must be able to set in place boundaries. And for every single one of these things, you're going to have to know who you are. And so as I said, I have 40 questions, and anybody who wants that question, I'll give them, that I use to help people assess who exactly they are. Because I feel it's such a critical component of having and building healthy relationships.
So please put your hands together for her. So we can, you are not even saying we can. Dr. Ruben was like, before you think of taking questions, I have the question. Okay, we'll take 2 questions for her. Thank you, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Dr.
For that brilliant presentation. Now, one phrase I have been hearing since yesterday is community. Yesterday, Pastor Gideon talked about capacity, community, commission.
Yes.
Now, when Pastor Mildred was also speaking, she also referred to the word community. If something is happening, seek help, listen to people, even if it is gossip, follow the gossip, and they lead you halfway to your solution. But when we're talking about navigating conflict in order to build healthy relationships, where do you place family in this? Family and friends. Because when you are in a relationship, the man will go and talk to his family members when there is conflict. The woman will go and talk to her family members when there is any conflict, and her friends. It's possible that those family members and those friends will even complicate the conflict further. In fact, long after the couple will have solved their problem, the people, the outsiders, I call them third parties, they will be on that conflict, taking positions on both sides and making it more difficult. So, to have a healthy relationship, how do you navigate that gray line in
You see, personally, thank you, Dr. Abati, for that question. You see, personally for me, I love the fact now that people are taking counseling more serious. There are very seasoned counselors here. Pastor Mildred, I know for certain. I've been taking one of her courses, on that. You see, family, and I dare say, even my course, relationship with parents and in-laws, talks about these things. You see, family is not the best people to talk to when it comes to conflict in marriage. In an ideal situation, couples, you align yourself with the right kind of person. You've talked about how you want to communicate, you've set boundaries in place, and you agree you're not going to talk to anybody else. Family is never best when it comes to conflict between a husband and a wife, especially. If you find that you guys, and it's best for you to have the ability to resolve it between yourselves, but if you don't have the ability, it's best to seek objective help. And it's just for these reasons that you've spoken about. Because you see, naturally, you might be biased towards your own side. That's number one. And then number two, long after the couple may have been able to sort out their differences, it sticks in the minds of those people. And so the other person, one person may then be playing to the gallery because you've told him how your parents and your siblings, how the man is the most wicked man in the whole world, and I slapped you when you laid down and all that. You understand? But now you people have made up everything, but now they can't get past it. Family is never the best to go to in marital conflict. If you do have an issue and you can't sort it out between yourselves, then please find a counselor that you can speak to. So that's what I don't know whether I answered the question, Dr. Abati, but the truth is, in navigating conflict, I don't advise that couples go to parents or go to what do they call it, to parents, siblings, and I don't even know, because not all friends are mature, because there's some friends you'll go to and say, that my husband did ABC, and then they tell you, pack your bag and leave, because I will never condone such. So it's best you go to, it's best you pick people who are trained to be objective and can then give you the advice or the counsel that you need. Family is not it for that. So that's my response, Dr. Abati. I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, Auntie, the same question, because this is actually one question that I get thrown at, in the war room. We also have this set. I don't want to just be on the men, but also the women. It could be both ways. But mainly, since I run a women, platform, so the questions come from the women. So majorly, the major concern is that even when they want to, they don't want to bring their in-laws in, but their husbands seem to be the ones to even involve the other family, their family in it. Then what is the advice? Because even as much as you ask them to come to seek counsel from people like you, professionals, not all Nigerian men. In fact, all Nigerian men don't believe in it. Alright, so it is a very, very difficult situation. How do you tackle such? My second question on the same question.
Don't let me forget the first one.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. I get thrown and they ask me questions like, what about when they have this stubborn? In fact, that is actually the main question. So they have stubborn husbands who wouldn't want to take advice from someone else. They don't want to take counsel from a professional, or even the worst is not even go to their friends. But they don't even want to take counsel. What do you do in such situation?
Okay, I'm going to answer this question in a roundabout sort of way. It's going to seem as if I'm going to digress, but I feel the need to say this. Let me tell you, if you're single here, you have a unique opportunity to get it right. That's what I'm going to stand for. You understand? I always like to say when I'm speaking that we that are married, the Lord is helping us. Do you understand? If you're single, you have a unique opportunity to get it right. And this is why I say, in terms of building a healthy relationship, I tell you, you need to know who you are. You need to have discovered who you are, what you want for yourself, how you intend to get there. You see, because this will help you to align yourself with somebody who navigates life in the same way. So I'm not saying that people can't change. I'm not saying that you can't know everything that there is to know, and that you can know everything there is to know about a person before you marry them. But a kind person is a kind person. It's fundamental. I really mean it. A person who has certain core values, those things are inbuilt and intrinsic. It will have to do with the person's life experiences, the way they've grown up, the things that have shaped them, and all that. Those are what has produced that man. And so it's very important that you give yourself the chance, as much as is possible, while prayerfully discerning, to know this person, how they handle conflict, whether they're a mommy's boy, there's so many things. So I'm going to start it from there for those who are single. Now, because you see, by the time this man is refusing to go and all that, but let me leave it there to the singles. Now, for those who are already married, you see, whether or not that person wants to go for counseling, there's a counsel that I received many years ago, and it resonated, and I tell it to people now. You see, you may have to start with you. You know, do you understand? Because you don't have control, so to say, over another person. You may have to start with you. So when women come to me and say, I know my husband is not going to come for counseling, I tell them, still speak to me. Let's still speak. Because you see, the things you work on about yourself may give you a different perspective on the man, where the man is coming from. It may give you a different perspective on yourself. It will enable you better deal with the things that have come from that person not doing those things or coming for that counseling. So that's number one. Work on you. It's always good to start with the man or the woman in the mirror. Work on you. In fact, I'm not a pastor, but there's a scripture and I'll allow the pastors to interpret it, whether I'm interpreting it right, that God has whatever to deal with all disobedience when your own obedience is complete. So you need to deal with your own self, even if that person refuses to do so, because you can't make them do that. You can't make them come. So maybe that change in you may affect a change in them. Now, for those who are married to those stubborn men, and no offense to the men here, the African man, the Nigerian man especially, I don't know about other, let me just speak about what I know. It's a unique creed. It's unique, let me just put that. So many of them are not going to come. It's something we have to just deal with in our own dynamic. So my thing would be work on you. And then, I call it NHM, but then NHM, the other thing is that, you see, there's something I speak about, and I actually speak about it in my book, and Boom, Bob's your uncle, and For Real, Fanny's your aunt. There's something I call these three things. When you find yourself in certain kinds of situations in marriage, I call it these three things. And I'm not going to go into those three things here. The reason why is I don't want to be... you have to receive these three things in concept. But there are three things there are three things to do when you find yourself in that kind of situation. And for women like us, you rarely choose the third option. But 1 and 2 are options that a lot of people go into. So I'm going to answer it kind of in that way, because many women have a situation where the men just refuse to come. I thank God for people like Dr. Abati, Pastor Gideon. I can see another man here, I'm not sure who he is, who are beginning to try to come out to understand the woman, and many men are sort of talking to the men now. So maybe that will change as things go on. So I answered the question in a kind of roundabout manner, but I just say one, single, you have a unique opportunity to get it right. Those who are married, God is helping us. But one thing I'll say is work on you. And then also, if you ask me about these three things privately, I will tell you there are three things, and I've looked at it from every which way, even from personal experience, and those are the only three options that you have.
So we have one final question. Those three things, you can book a consultation with her. You can also have a session with Pastor Mildred and Pastor Kingsley. But we'll take one last question. And this is and we have several relationship counselors here, so just we are not ignoring your question, but we have to keep to the launch time so that we don't overrun it. But we're taking the last question from Chetachi.
Thank you so much. My name is Chetachi. It's not a question, it's a comment. I just want to say that what you shared this morning is a full curriculum on marriage and relationships. So I really don't hear a lot. I just want to encourage you, you need to do more. There's a whole lot happening out there. And we want your voice to be orchestrated in the world
so that they will know that from the foundation, building up, they can actually get it right. Auntie Betty, I read your stories. Amazing. My husband and I read one of your stories, the one about you slamming the door, and that story, the comments I read on that story, you will see that people are ready to learn. People are ready to make things right, because we are building relationships, you're building the community, you're building the nation, and permit me to say, because marriage hasn't been right all this while, you see the decadence in the society.
Yes.
So please, we need your voice amplified. God bless you.
Let's put your hands together for